time, but I brought the books. That's the only thing. But
Yeah, I brought Sandy's thing to let the James Mill this one. Yeah, and I think I had full keys with it. Probably had well, see, I dropped them on there. No, maybe not. No, you know what? Maybe I didn't have them. No, we'll just go with this. Okay. I think we all right, we're going to start, guys, because Jamie has a schedule to keep. We all have, we want to, and if people float in, that's fine. And first of all, I want to thank you all for being here. My name is Donna Colorio. I am the Worcester School Committee member. I'm serving my second term. Second broken term, I mean, you know. I'm also the chairman of the Common Core Massachusetts ballot question. I'm a parent. I have 3 children, one who is presently in a Worcester Public School, high school. And I want to just thank you all for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about what Common Core is. I'm going to have Jamie Gass, I'll introduce him in a second, speak a little bit about what Common Core is, like an overview, history of it. Then from there we'll have Rob Sargeant talk a little bit, he's a teacher in Worcester Public Schools, talk a little bit about firsthand being a teacher. And then I will conclude by talking and speaking a little bit about the ballot question itself, how we can we have an action item, which is the ballot question, how do we get rid of Common Core in the state of Massachusetts. So our first speaker, Jamie Gass, is a Pioneer Institute Director of the Center of School Reform. At Pioneer, he has framed, commissioned, and managed over 60 research papers and numerous policies events on K-12 education reform topics. You will probably note that Jamie, many times you'll see an op-ed piece in either the Globe, the Herald, or the Telegram, and Jamie has either written it or co-written it with somebody else. Previously, he worked at the Massachusetts Office of Educational Quality and Accountability as a senior policy analyst, technical writer in the state budget office under 2 Massachusetts governors. And in 1990, Jamie worked for the Dean of Boston University of Education, Boston University Management Team, in its historical partnership with the Chelsea Public Schools. He's appeared on various media outlets. He's on WBZ Night Side with Dan Ray, so was I. WRK, Tom and Todd. No, I haven't been on there yet. WBZ Keller is at large. WGBZ's Kelly Crosley show. He has been quoted in The Economist, Education Week, the Boston Globe, and his op-eds, as I have previously said, have published in the Boston Herald and Worcester Telegram, Lowell Sun, the Providence Journal, and many others. So at that point, let me introduce Jamie Gass.
Thank you, Donna. And first of all, I want to thank you folks for taking time on Saturday morning to come out, and I want to thank Donna for all of her hard work. We've been to 20-some-odd states in the last couple of years about Common Core, but the reality of it is that Massachusetts is the first state to put Common Core or removing Common Core on the ballot, and that really is due to the really great work that Donna has done. It's really remarkable.
In my team.
If you consider that she has done that while getting reelected to school committee here at Worcester, it's really a remarkable accomplishment. I mean, to give you a little bit of the context, there's a charter school initiative that's on the ballot in Massachusetts too. But they have a enormous out-of-state presence and a lot of money behind that. But the reality of it is that Donna's work on the Common Core ballot initiative got significantly more signatures on her own without professional signature gatherers, etc. I mean, I think she may have had a small number toward the end, but 95%, 98% of the signatures were ones that she and her team gathered all over the state, and it's really a remarkable accomplishment. I think even the charter school people were looking at it and saying, wow, this is a big accomplishment. So you folks here in Worcester are very fortunate to have her, and we in Massachusetts are very fortunate. So I'm going to sort of frame it at the beginning saying I work for Pioneer Institute. It's a private, nonprofit think tank. We are nonpartisans. We don't back any particular candidate, and we don't take positions on ballot initiatives. So I want to say that, and it's important to say that because I think you'll gather my opinion of the ballot initiative, but I have to say that up front so that people understand that we are really known for independent peer review research on topics and kind of calling it like we see it. Once we do the research and gather the information, then we work very hard with op-eds, radio, television, getting out the ideas about the kinds of policies that we think policymakers should be making, right? So I'll just give you kind of the overview of what Common Core is. Because even though 40-some-odd states have adopted, we're 5 or almost 6 years into Common Core, the reality of it is a lot of parents, a lot of lawmakers, a lot of people in the general public don't know very much about it. I mean, an interesting thing about it is that it's really driven through, so what it is a set of English and math standards that were developed by Washington, D.C. based lobby organizations that represent the governors and the state commissioners of each state. They don't represent the states, they represent the governors and the commissioners of each state. And they were developed really out of the public view because they were developed by private organizations. They were not subject to the same level of public scrutiny and criticism that any set of standards had previously been developed either in Massachusetts or in other states. And most of the money that came for the development of the standards and the advocacy for it is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You folks know who Bill Gates is. He's the founder of Microsoft, right? And he certainly knows a lot about computers and being a successful businessman. But the reality of it is that both he and the people that he enlisted really don't have any previous experience whatsoever developing any standards in K-12 education, not to mention good standards. So that kind of gives you the ground rules, the sort of the baseline. The national standards are supposed to be coupled with national tests. In Massachusetts, you probably have heard the acronym, the PARCC test. In other states like New Hampshire and other states on the West Coast, there's a test called SBAC, which is a Smarter Balanced Testing Consortia. There are these two federally funded testing consortia that the Common Core is supposed to be locked into like this. And then at the local level, school districts are supposed to develop their local curriculum, that is what's taught in the classroom with the Common Core in preparation for these tests. So that kind of gives you the overview. So, why are we here on Saturday morning, right? And the sort of the short answer of it is that we all either are parents or grandparents, and we love our children, and we love our grandchildren, and we want them to be able to have the same kinds of opportunities that we have had or better, right? For literally centuries, that's why people have been coming to this country. No matter how you got to this country, that's why people came here. They came here because there was liberty and there were laws that created a baseline so that people could pursue their happiness, right? That's what Thomas Jefferson said, right? Pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence, right? The way in which you do that, traditionally, the way in which that has happened in this country is that our public schools were from the beginning, going back to the founding era, back to the 1830s, back when the fundamental institutions of this country were being set up. The public schools were designed to be a wellspring for citizenship, where people learn the fundamentals about how you are a citizen, what are your rights, what are your liberties, what can the government do, what can't it do, how are your kids going to acquire the knowledge of literature and math and science to succeed in the world, right? And hopefully through high quality literature and through stories and reading about the founding documents, and that you're going to learn about, and we're all going to learn about, the things that bind us together as human beings, right? You don't read Shakespeare, you don't read great literature just because it's beautiful. That is important. It's very important. But the reason why we read it is that it's timeless, and it teaches us, and it teaches our children and our grandchildren how to be human, right? It teaches us about compassion and friendship and virtue and vices, all the things and the complexities that make human beings human, right? On the math side, mathematics and science, which go together. I mean, Galileo, several hundred years ago, said that science is written in the language of mathematics. So if your child wants to be an engineer or a mathematician or work in the technical areas or be a doctor, you gotta know math, right? So it's a basic grounding in mathematics and English and science and history, that these are the kinds of things, these are the reasons why people came to this country. Well, traditionally in this country, going back hundreds of years now, the basic constitutional framework for this country is that K-12 education is the proper legal and financial responsibilities of states and localities. The federal government really plays a minor role. Even today, only about 10% of the money that goes to schooling in the United States comes from Washington, D.C., right? And Massachusetts from the beginning, going back to really the 1600s, but definitely by the late 18th century, Massachusetts was always known as a place that loved learning, had great public schools, had great colleges and universities, and then that was the basis for the success of this state. We didn't have oil, right? We don't have lots of forests and natural resources to chop down and sell all over the world. We had codfish, right? Which Cape Cod. We had codfish, and we had our brains. Massachusetts is a state that survives by its brains, right? Which is really important because the global economy that we are living in, you've got to have well-educated people. Not only to perpetuate your democracy, to make sure that they have rights and they understand their rights and that they are defended and respected, but they have to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to compete with China and India and South Korea and Hong Kong. Those are the things our children and grandchildren must have in the 21st century. So the good news of it is that back in the 1990s, Republicans and Democrats got together and they crafted a landmark education reform law called the 1993 Massachusetts Education Reform Act. What they decided to do was put an enormous commitment of state and local money, and we've spent well over $100 billion since that time, in exchange for a lot of the hard things that people in K-12 education hadn't done, right? We're going to have a commitment to liberal arts education, English, math, science, and history. We're going to have an MCAS test to make sure that when kids graduated, that the diploma, that they could read it, and that the diploma meant something, right? We're going to have charter schools that we're going to provide school choice, particularly for poor and minority parents who were oftentimes had kids that were trapped in underperforming urban districts. The charter schools were going to provide some choice and options for parents. Teacher testing, so the teachers and the students are tested on the same high-quality academic content. That was the kind of the basic deal. The money for the high-quality standards and the tests and the accountability. That's the way it worked, right? So over the last 30 years or so, there has been an enormous amount of discussion, debate, and concern about how public schooling in this country is performing. There have been enormous amounts of, talking about trees being cut down, there's whole forests that have died supporting research to help improve the quality of public education in this country, right? There was a report called A Nation at Risk, which was authored in 1983, and it said if we had the public system of education we have now imposed on us by a foreign enemy, it would be an act of war. We had fallen dramatically. Americans traditionally, for a century, had been known as among the better educated people in the world, right? But that was changing. It was changing, and by 1983, this report from the federal government said, we've got serious problems ahead. Well, Massachusetts met that with the Education Reform Act. And while the rest of the country has continued to stagnate in its performance, Massachusetts has gone basically from middle of the pack in 1993 to #1 in the country, and the only state in the union that is internationally competitive. It's a claim that no other state can make. And it was this money for the standards and accountability that got us from here to here and made us the envy of everyone. There's a test called the NAEP test. It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's been around for about 40 years. Every state in the union takes it every couple of years. No state in the history of that test has ever been number one on every grade tested and every category tested, in English, in math, in science. Massachusetts in 2005 was the first state in the history of that test to do it. And then we did that again in 2007, in 2009, in 2011, and 2013. It's like, I tell audiences, it's the equivalent of winning the World Series 5 times in a row and doing it in 4 straight games each time. But the goal of that Nation at Risk report in 1983, and the goal of the 21st century, is to compete with the high-performing, largely East Asian countries, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. So Massachusetts in 2007 tested as its own individual country. It was one of only 2 states in the union to do it. And guess what? Our 8th graders were tied for #1 in the world in science. The only way you can do that is if you have high-quality math standards. And the only way you can do that is if you have high-quality science standards. That's the only way route there, okay? And then we did that again in 2013. In mathematics, we were among the top 3 or 4 countries in the world. A remarkable, remarkable accomplishment. In a way, this is all the good news. The good news is that we know we can do this work. We know we had great standards. We know we had great tests. We had great teachers, school committee members, principals, and parents that were help getting us to where we needed to go. The bad news of it is that in 2009, 2010, the federal government initiated a program called the Race to the Top. Here in Massachusetts, we could rightfully say it was the race to become Massachusetts. But they initiated a federal grant program where states had to compete for about $4.3 billion in federal money. In order to compete for that money, you had to sign on to all of the priorities that they outlined in the grant program. One of the things that they outlined in that grant program was that you must adopt national standards, the Common Core, that were developed by the Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. So, in 2010, when everyone was at the beach or barbecuing and having a good time, the State Board of Education in Massachusetts ditched our higher quality standards in English and math for the Common Core. Pioneer, where I work, we thought it was a good time, before the adoption, thought it was a good time that someone take a look at these standards. What is in Common Core? Why do all these states have to adopt it? Why does Massachusetts, who's already #1 in the country and internationally competitive, why do we have to adopt standards from the federal government? So we got the best researchers we could, both in English and math. And it's a kind of longer story, but I'll boil it down to this. Common Core cuts the classic literature, poetry, and drama that was 90% of the reason why Massachusetts kids were #1 in the country in reading for 5 years running on the nation's report card. Okay? On the math side, algebra in 8th grade is what all the high-performing countries and all the high-performing states allow their kids access to in order to get them on a path where they can get into the science, technology, engineering courses in high school, right? You've got to start earlier. For decades, people in this country, the students in our country, were several years behind. Under the Common Core, it's moved forward, not from 8th grade access, but to 9th grade and early 10th grade. American students, Massachusetts students, under the Common Core, lose 2 years of mathematics, while the rest of the world that are really competing, the Hong Kongs, the Singapores, China, they are making sure their kids have access in the 8th grade, right? We are a knowledge-based economy. Massachusetts, as I said, is an economy that is driven by our brains, right? We have got to have this. We can't lose 2 years, right? We cannot lose 2 years. I don't care what kid, what background, what zip code, they can't lose 2 years of mathematics in the world that we live in, right? You've got to have those skills to be able to compete, right? So that's the academic quality side of it. We've done other research on it, and I'll just go through it quickly because there's a lot of details. But the bottom line is that while the federal government did this, they pushed states into adopting the Common Core. There are 3 federal laws that explicitly tells them that they cannot do that. They're not supposed to do it. There's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which was signed by Lyndon Johnson. There was the General Education Provision Act of 1970, signed by Richard Nixon. and then there's the enabling legislation that set up the U.S. Department of Education itself, signed by Jimmy Carter. All three of those federal laws says the federal government may not play a role in funding, directing, validating, advancing, bullying, encouraging national standards or tests, which is exactly what Massachusetts was forced into through the race to the top. That's how we adopted. We got $250 million for the federal government to give up the best standards in the country, some of the best standards in the world, and turn our back on the over $100 billion that we had already spent to be number one. I mean, incidentally, we're spending $9 billion per year at the state and local level in Massachusetts, right? So $250 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in comparison to the well over $100 billion and the $9 billion we're spending every single year, okay? I talk about the money for one reason. You would think that given the fact that the Gates Foundation has spent over $250 million advocating for the Common Core, not just in Massachusetts, but around the country, you'd figure that some of the people, the Governor's Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, that someone would say, what's this going to cost? Right? Massachusetts already spent all those billions of dollars to be number one. Someone going to figure out what's going to cost? The answer to that question is no. In most states, and including Massachusetts, the State Budget Office, the Board of Education, the Department of Education, none of them bothered to run a basic cost-benefit analysis or projection of what's going to cost taxpayers to implement what I think are lower quality standards. Right? So Pioneer, where I work, we said, well, we got to get someone to do a cost analysis for it. And I actually think that they were done in 2011. I actually think that evidence now shows that we had a lowball figure. It wasn't some astronomical figure that we just ran off the top of our heads to make it look like a lot of money. But the figure that our researchers came up with, and these are researchers that have worked for both Republicans and Democrats. They've worked in the federal government under the first Bush administration and under the first administration of President Trump. They worked for Republicans and Democrats. The figure they came up with for the national figure was $16 billion, right? And for a state like Massachusetts, it's about $450 to $500 million, right? So we were going to have to spend $400 or $500 million more to align all of our textbooks, the technology in our classrooms, retrain the teachers for lower standards, right? It's insanity, folks, right? Nobody makes decisions like this. No one makes a decision to adopt something of lower quality and pay way more money to do it. And the reason why they didn't want anyone to know what they was going to cost, and they didn't really want to check it, because they knew if people found out how much it was going to cost, they'd be irate, right? But the good thing about this is that whether it's Donna or the people that have driven the ballot initiative here in Massachusetts or the activists, and you see this issue is viral. It is everywhere, right? I mean, I've spoken in front of groups of 5 people and 900 people. And let me tell you, moms and grandmothers in particular are outraged about this, because they're the ones, let's be honest, that do the homework with kids. They see the crazy math, right? You can check on the internet. A mom in Ohio will put a video of the crazy math that the Common Core pushes on their kids. And next thing, within a week, it's got 1 million views. Right? It's just moms, right? And that's the way it's been driven, whether it's the ballot initiative, it has been moms, it has been people that have never done this kind of work before. That the more information they got, the more engaged, the more they looked into it, the more they saw the kind of stuff that their kids were bringing home, how they weren't getting straight answers from the teachers or the administrators of the schools. They were reaching out and appealing to the public officials to right the ship, to go in a different direction than what we've been doing for the last 5 years. I just close with 2 things, because I'm really interested in hearing your questions, what the other folks have to say here. The reality of it is we're now 5 years into this thing, right? And it has very broad support. There's a poll that was done just in the last day or so, looked at all the different ballot initiatives, right? From 53% to 22%, which is basically double, right? The people in Massachusetts want to get rid of this. We've gotten, Donna and all of her folks have gotten a tremendous number of signatures. They have pushed this thing forward in a way that I think is like David and Goliath. No one would have predicted a year or two ago that they would have gotten as many signatures as they have, right? So the polling data is not on their side, is on our side, and the public opinion and the public sentiment is on our side too, right? The thing that I would encourage you to do, and I can't tell you what position to take on this ballot, although I think you can guess what my view is reach out to your public official. Make sure that the governor and the chair of the Board of Education and the Secretary of Education and your state legislators, who frankly, in 2010, Governor Baker, when he was a candidate, was very strong on this issue. He's been a little less strong when he ran the second time. But I would encourage you, and I don't have his phone number here, but I would encourage you to call his office. If there are things you hear this morning that you find alarming or discouraging about this decision, I would encourage you to reach out, because he needs to hear from you. That's his responsibility, is to get the input from public officials, from the public. But the really good news, I think, about all of this is as people find out more information about it, that they are engaging on this topic. And that's why I'm really grateful for you folks taking the time to come here this morning, listen to me and to others, and I'm really, really grateful for the work that Donna has done. She has done a tremendous job. Everybody, irrespective of their opinion on this, can agree that we need to have a debate on a thing that impacts 1 million school children in the state and is so vital to the performance of our state and the future of our state. And so the work that people like Donna have done, I think, is just an enormous public service, an enormous public contribution to the public discourse. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time and look forward to any questions you might have.